Well, you can't ask for much more than that, Pitt fans, as the Pitt Panthers continue their trek to try to earn respect. And I believe they did it today, a 28-7 victory over Virginia Tech. Pitt certainly in the driver's seat now to not only win the Coastal Division, but maybe even more with the rest of this college football season very much in front of them. The Pitt Panthers again win at 28-7. This is your Pitt postgame show here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and Pittsburgh Sports Now. I'm your host, Mike Asti, and I will be joined by Pittsburgh Sports Now's Mike Vukovcan to recap this game and also preview a big game for Pitt next week against Clemson, a Clemson team that's already lost a couple times. They're not nearly who they've been the last few years, not nearly a national title contender this year to this point, but still Clemson talent. It's going to be a big game. Mike, though, before we get there, on to this game. Kenny Pickett did it again. Pitt did it again. Obviously, the offense showed up. I think that was expected because that's happened all year, every game, even in the one loss to Western Michigan. But the defense, for me, is kind of the story of this game right now. That was the issue in the Western Michigan loss. That's why Pitt has one loss on the season. That's why some were concerned. And the defense has really stepped up, but especially in this game, best effort from the defense in a while, in a must-win game, a big game for Pitt, and a conference foe.
Yeah, I think there was a couple storylines in this game. First half, I believe Virginia Tech had eight possessions. Pitt held them to 3 and out on 6 of those. They stopped them on 4th and inches on the other, and then the other they caused a turnover. We heard how the quarterback was going to give Pitt problems as far as being able to move. I'm not sure why Fuentes didn't exploit that, but I don't know that it would have mattered. One thing I noticed about the Pitt defense today, Pitt just looked faster than Virginia Tech. They looked like they had better athletes, both offensively and defensively. Anytime somebody looked as though they were going to hit the corner for Virginia Tech, there were 2 and 3 Pitt either linebackers or defensive backs there. It's funny. I think this might have been one of Pitt's best games of the season, most complete, and yet it was probably Kenny Pickett. And I say this, and this is not a criticism. It was probably Kenny Pickett's least effective or his worst game of the year.
You
when
could
I say
worst,
that. I don't mean he was bad. I'm just saying that might just that might show you how Pitt is developing as a team when their best player. I think there were factors. I think Virginia Tech was scheming for him. I think they were loading things up. They weren't letting him go deep. And I also think the win was a factor. But I think it's a pretty good thing when your best player didn't, I don't think he played particularly great. And I think Pitt had a great performance today.
Yeah, Pitt did. Pitt won it 28-7 again, thanks to their defense. Kenny Pickett, not nearly his best game of the season, but most teams would take this from the quarterback. 22 for 37, 204, so not gaudy in terms of yards, but didn't need to in this game. A couple of touchdown passes, no interceptions, so still didn't make any bad mistakes. Was sacked once, and a QB rating of still 123, even though the yards weren't there and the efficiency wasn't there as much as he's had most of this season. But I don't think that's a bad enough game from him, especially with them winning, that in any way he should drop out of any conversation for being the best quarterback of the year or one of them, or maybe if Pitt keeps winning, of course, get in those Heisman watch lists. Still a great day for Pickett overall, but it also was a day that it felt like early on in this game, once Pitt jumped up to especially a 14-0 lead, and Virginia Tech's offense was just very, very sluggish, and we've seen that most of the year. Even when they've won, they've not really been able to get the offense going as much as really the hype has said they should. It felt like Pitt, and clearly they could have just turned it off at 14-0, and that would have been it. They didn't need the rest of the points. This was a day that the defense was able to carry them through. So going to that defensive side of the football, what did Pitt do defensively to derail Virginia Tech? And also, what have you noticed Pitt has done? And you got to give Pat Narduzzi credit. He's a defensive-minded guy. What has he done with this defense since the atrocious Western Michigan loss where the defense collapsed and let down Kenny Pickett in his 6 touchdowns? What has changed for this defense? A solid performance against Georgia Tech, but a ridiculously solid performance against Virginia Tech.
I don't think Virginia Tech had the ability. I think Pitt knew this.
Okay.
Everyone talked about it before the game, and I think Pitt game plan for this. They didn't have the ability to run the ball, and this cliche is used a lot. But when you make a team one-dimensional and you know what they're going to do,
Yeah.
they were dropping guys, but Pitt was just better defensively. They had no threat to run the ball, and I think Virginia Tech wasn't able to. I think they had a couple chances in the first half, but they were going into that wind, and that caused them problems. But they just weren't good enough. They just didn't have good enough athletes. They had nobody on this team. We heard about Robinson, the receiver. I think Pitt's defensive backfield played pretty well, aside from that, the one drive where they got a few pass interference calls, but the game was well in hand there. But I think the game really changed at the end of the first half when they scored two. The score was still 7-0 Pitt with 6 minutes left in the first half, and Pitt scored 14 quick points. And once it got to that point, game was over. Virginia Tech wasn't going to come back, barring Pitt turning the ball over in place, and that's not going to happen. Most days with Kenny Pickett.
It does feel like that if Pitt's defense shows up, especially like they did in this game, that Pitt can beat anybody. Their offense can hang with anybody, which eventually we'll get to that game against Clemson and the rest of the year and what that means for Pitt. This, of course, is the Pitt Postgame Show here on PSL and PSN. You want to head over to Pittsburgh Sports now for the game recap and the rest of this postgame coverage after Pitt's 28-7 victory over Vodtech. Pitt now 5-1 on the year. Virginia Tech, who it really does appear now, they're 3-2, I believe. It appears they might be a little overrated, to say the least here. Entering the year, at one point, they were 15th ranked in the country when West Virginia beat them to get the Black Diamond Trophy. They lost WVU, who clearly is not that great of a team, Notre Dame, who is still ranked in the top 15, and Pitt. But Virginia Tech has not been nearly what they were supposed to be.
No, I think they're a good defensive team. I think they caused they caused some of the reasons why Pitt's passing game wasn't as great. They got after Pickett a lot. Today was probably the most pressure he's felt all season. They got after the Pitt offensive line a little bit, but I think they were just a one-dimensional team. They needed their defense to create some turnovers. They weren't able to do that, and Virginia Tech just wasn't good offensively. Wasn't good enough offensively. And as the announcers are saying, I actually really enjoyed these announcers today. Andre Ware, I think he wasn't afraid to say things. Had a pretty good announcing crew here, and they said it. They talked about it at the end, as though Pitt's a dangerous team when their defense is playing like this, because they're just a well-rounded team. I thought their special teams today, when they had a punt and kickoff, their guys were just – I just noticed the speed today of Pitt. Everywhere all over the field, the guys were down the field on special teams. Defense was just crazy.
They played like it was a must-win game. They played like a hungry team, and they really played like a team that I think they have now, and maybe they had to get over that Western Michigan loss. They've got over it to this point. Maybe they had to be humbled in that game to motivate themselves. I don't know what occurred there. But now, especially after the bye, and I'm sure everybody told them, the coaches told them, and they heard this from fans, it's all in front of you. These other teams have lost. Now that they've seen Clemson lose, it appears it's a team that's hungry and feels like they can beat anybody, and feels like, hey, we have an outside shot at a New Year's Day playoff, beyond winning the conference, not even just getting in the conference title game, but actually winning the ACC this year. That's how they played in this game.
We got to touch upon the biggest story of the game, I think. I was trying to find a way to get this in, but that last drive of the game, I've talked about it. I think I've talked about it ad nauseum for 2 or 3 years.
You have.
Running the football.
We were going to get there, yeah. And they've been doing it.
An 11-minute drive to close the game. The game was already out of hand, but Virginia Tech knew Pitt was running the ball, and Pitt's line. And today, the biggest story of today is that Pitt has themselves a number one running back. There's no more
finally
Davis, Hammond. Israel Bonaconda is a big time back. he had his first 100-yard game.
140
yards
140.
on 21 carries.
Yep.
And his speed, the amount of times he was able to beat the defender to the outside to get up the sideline. And I tell you, the other guy he reminded me of today, Mike, a little bit was, this is the first time I've actually noticed that style. I'm not sure if this is new or if he's been like this, but he looked like Le'Veon Bell.
Okay.
His patience.
Big words. Big words. Yeah.
Yeah. He the way he was just waiting for the hole and then he shot through. I'm going to go back and look at the game, but the way he was very patient in the back of the line of scrimmage and his straight line speed, once he sees a hole, he's going to get through it, especially with his speed and his 220-pound frame.
Right.
Guarantee you, I haven't heard Pat Narduzzi yet, but that is going to be what he's going to talk. He's going to talk about his defense, but he's going to talk about that offensive line and the guts today of Bonaconda, because he made some tough runs. He stuck his nose in, and I see it all over Twitter with Pitt fans. They're very excited. It looks as though they finally got themselves a number one back.
Yeah, Abonaconda, 21 carries, 140 yards, 6.7 on average. And we've seen Pitt this year with Hammond especially sprinkle in running backs besides Davis. They get big yards. They have solid games. But this is against by far maybe the best defense they faced all year. This is a team that is in their conference that they had a lot to play for in terms of beating. And I also think, Mike, and this is why I believe Pitt fans are really excited. Of course, they're excited. This team's now 5-1. They're undefeated in conference play. They have the Coastal in front of them. They're 80+% chance to win the division and be in the ACC title game. And the way Clemson's playing this year, and Wake is a ranked team, but I'm sure Pitt fans feel they can beat them. Pitt fans got to be excited about the rest of the year. They're going to be favored in a lot of these games coming up this year. But I also think part of the reason why they're so excited is the way Pitt won this game. Biggest game of the year. They won it big, but not just by the score, the style they won this game. Of course, Mike, as you know, if Pitt would have won this game 28-21, where Kenny Pickett had to do it in a shootout in a 2-minute drive at the end with a touchdown pass. Yeah, it'd be great for Pitt. They still would be excited. It'd be a big game next week, and Pitt would have everything in front of them. But to win it when Pickett's not at his best, doesn't have his best days, despite still a good day, you have so much going for you on the ground throughout the game, but especially at the end to hold on, and your defense really, really steps up to carry it and shuts down the opponent. That is what really has to excite Pitt fans, because those were the two unknowns this year. Pitt didn't have a number one running back entering the season. They didn't even have it mid-season. And the defense is what cost them a game earlier in the year. Those two things right now, as we're speaking, and of course it's week to week in college football, but right now they appear corrected. Right now they appear clicking on all cylinders. And if they're clicking, I think everybody in the country feels comfortable that Kenny Pickett's going to show up every Saturday or whenever Pitt would play.
Yeah, and the other thing that they have to be excited about is the fact that people were wondering how they're going to come out of the bye. Is Pitt going to pit in the game? Are they going to, are they going to not play up? It was a big game for both teams because everyone knew the winner of this game. It was a 2-game swing. Virginia Tech had as much to play for as Pitt did. It wasn't as though they were playing some scrub team coming out of the bye that had nothing to play for. Virginia Tech knew what was at stake. They could have been in Pitt's position
if they won. Sure,
Pitt was just a better team, both physically. Every part of the game today, Pitt was the better team. There were very few penalties. Pitt didn't turn the ball over. They just played a well-run. They looked like a very well-coached team.
Yeah,
Pat Narduzzi.
Yeah.
They looked like a very great. They look like a team that how you should look coming out of a bye against a big team with a lot on the line.
Yeah,
that hasn't happened every time with this Pitt program over the last few years. I don't want to say they turned the corner yet, but 5-1 looks pretty good. And I'll tell you this: I was going to make this statement. I was going to tweet this out. And I said, you know what? My luck of tweeting, things happen.
You save it for me and you save it for PSL. Yeah, I appreciate it.
there isn't 25. you could take this however you want it, but there isn't 25 better teams in the country than Pitt.
No, they got to be
whether
ranked.
or not they're
100%.
ranked or not, whether or not
100%.
they're ranked or not. I don't care about the rankings. I can point out teams 15 through 25 that Pitt is a better team. Hell with the rankings. This is a good team. They just got to keep winning and let the rest, whatever it is, we'll see what happens this week. I doubt, though, that Pitt's going to get ranked. It's very rare that they didn't receive. I don't believe that if they did, it might have been a couple.
Yeah.
They didn't receive any votes last week. It's very hard for a team not to receive votes the previous week and then to all of a sudden shoot up and get ranked.
I guess, and I do hear that, but I do find it insane if Pitt doesn't get ranked. There is no way there are 25 better teams this season based on body of work or how they're playing. Either way you slice it, that have been better than Pitt. The only thing I think that may lead to Pitt being ranked, if I had to bet right now, I think they may slide in at 24, 25. It's not going to be a great ranking, but I think they'll get in there, is just because we've seen some upsets. We've seen some teams 12 through 20 already either lose or play very poorly and barely win. Of course, there are changes in the rankings in the top 10, but that's not going to affect Pitt. But that 12 through 25 could, and I think Pitt got to at least slide in that top 25 at this point.
At this point, I've been tracking it. Six teams to this point, and we still got the 7:00 games.
Yeah.
6 teams have lost so far in the top 25. 25
well, there you go. Right.
25 Texas, 20 Florida, 19 BYU, 17 Arkansas, 11 Kentucky, and 2 Iowa.
Yeah.
And
Iowa's not going to affect Pitt, but those other teams got to affect Pitt. I think Texas certainly leaves the ranking.
Oh yeah.
And there's no reason
why
Pitt doesn't at least replace them.
I'd have to go back and see last week on the rankings who were the teams that just or receiving votes and who were the first, who was number 26 or 27 according to the and what they did this week. And like I said, if Pitt was in the upper half like they were a couple weeks ago, I think prior to Western Michigan, where they're receiving a few more votes, I think they are, but I don't know that they're going to make it, but we'll see. But here's the other thing. I think Pitt fans, it
doesn't even matter really, as long as they keep winning and they win the division. Exactly. And then, it doesn't matter really.
It doesn't matter. The other thing that I think we should keep an eye on this week. I'm not sure how you feel the voting will go down, but I think Pitt's Bailey quiet down there.
She's excited too. She's excited.
My window's open and she sees kids out the window here. I think Pitt has a chance next week to host game day.
That's not out of the question. Yeah. That's not
the game's on ABC.
Right.
And I went through the schedule next week. The only 2 games, I think the 3 best games next week are Pitt Clemson, just because of the Clemson brand.
Yeah, even though they lost twice, right?
Yeah, just because they're Clemson and they're gonna, they're Notre Dame, USC, and then UCLA, Oregon. Those are the only 3 games that I could see on the game as far as game day. I'm not sure if Notre Dame has been on game day yet.
Yeah, and obviously USC
for the end of the year. They look at stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I think it's at least a possibility, especially with the game already being slated for. They've already announced that the game's either going to be on ABC or ESPN. So if the game's on ABC, you'd have you'd have your crew there. And I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think when ESPN tonight at the end of the night, when their executives are coming up with their whiteboard as far as who the teams are that they're considering.
Yeah,
I think Pitt Clemson has to be on there, and the other draw would be Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, I was going to say, in terms of next week's schedule around the country, in terms of a game that will matter, because obviously if Clemson wins it, they're right. I mean, they're right still in a driver's seat for their division. They're right back in there. Wake certainly could be vulnerable this year. They feel like they still got their season in front of them despite having lost in conference. They are still a very, very talented team, and Pitt has clearly everything in front of them right now with their record and yet having lost in conference and clearly having a chance to win the division, if not being a prohibited favorite. It's a borderline a slam dunk at this point, unless they really putter the season away. So with all of that said, and you have the brand of Clemson, they're going to bring fans in. Pitt still has a national fan base, even if the attendance at the stadium doesn't necessarily show that. Maybe that would be a negative. They wouldn't want to have a stadium that's not full, but this certainly could help things. But I think that's the game. I mean, really, if you're going to be fair and just pick it, I think that's the game. And I also think if you ask Kirk Herbstreit and some of the commentators, based on what they've been saying on game day this morning, they all talked about Pickett. They all talked about Pitt. Yep. You even hear it during this broadcast. They may say, I want to have a Pitt game. They want to get Pitt on there because of what Pickett's doing, certainly in comparison to Notre Dame, USC, which probably is the other conversation because they want to get Notre Dame on. But USC is so far out of the race, despite a national fan base, it would mean nothing. So maybe you give Notre Dame a game later on in the year, even if it doesn't matter as much, just because you want to get ND on. But this game matters on both sides. So I think that definitely is a thought. I definitely think that could happen. I wouldn't be shocked at all if it does happen. I do also want to go to the chat here because we have a lot of chatters during this show. A lot of Pitt fans are excited as well. There are some Virginia Tech fans in here, by the way, which we always get the opposing fans during these post-game shows. And they're basically just saying, Virginia Tech is overrated. Don't get too excited because Virginia Tech's not nearly as good as people thought they were, etc. So that's potentially a point. It's a big win for Pitt, but Virginia Tech is not nearly what they were supposed to be entering this season. At one point, top 15. They've lost several times. They're barely over 500. They're still in the thick of things for something this year, but they certainly are no longer in any type of driver's seat after this loss. Pitt does get this win, of course, beating Virginia Tech 28-7. Pitt
hey guys, I'm sorry about the dog.
we got an excited Pitt fan dog at least. No problem. Yeah.
Hey, Mike, hold on for a second. I'm gonna get her. You talk. I'm gonna get her out of this office.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, we got a Pitt fan excited here. Even Mike's dog pumped up for what could be in front of Pitt this year. The point is, Pitt gets the 28-7 victory. The point is, Kenny Pickett plays well enough, even though it's not his best performance. The point is, the fan base is excited, and Pitt does it in a way that also helps correct some issues and keeps the fans excited, maybe even makes them more excited, with Pitt doing it on the ground, finally finding that number one running back, and then also doing it defensively, by far their best performance on D this season. So, Mike, and again, I'm glad that we have Bailey excited here, of course. But yeah, I just want to see here through the chat before I go back to you. Great game by the Panthers, Pitt making a name for themselves. We certainly did talk about game day potentially being in Pittsburgh and covering that game. That certainly could absolutely be a conversation. And let's be honest, should probably happen if you look at the schedule next week around the country. That's certainly a game at Heinz Field. That's a game also. Let's be real about it. Those fans got to get there. I know the attendance is not always great.
Yeah, you're right.
Heinz Field. That's a game that if Pitt fans do not show up, if it's 35K for that game when you have your division in front of you and outside, they even brought up the freaking playoff in this game. I don't think they're going to go there, of course, but with all these teams losing, look at the rest of the season, Mike. If Michigan State and Michigan lose another game, they will play each other. So obviously that's one more loss. If Penn State loses again, Iowa's already lost now. These teams are losing. Everyone's losing. Notre Dame right now is 14. They could slide back in there. Oklahoma has a chance, but everyone thinks they're going to lose a game. It's not out of the realm of possibility. If Pitt runs this table, I don't think they're going to get in, but they could argue for something certainly. So with all that said, in the game against Clemson, it means so much for the program and getting revenge off of previous losses to Clemson when they were a giant. Pitt fans got to get there. Forget whether you have game day. They should have game day, but Pitt fans got to get there. And if they don't get there and Pitt has game day, that's going to look bad for the program, especially with how good this team is right now.
Yeah, I will be very it's one of the things I hate to talk about because I just right. It's a topic, but on this occasion, I believe that it's I've already got my commentary for this, one of my commentaries for this week.
Okay.
Pitt fans have to show up this week. This is going to be one of the biggest games at Heinz Field, and I'm going to have to go through the media guide and find out as far as importance and
I would guess like 2017, maybe the other
something
like
on the line. This is a huge game for Pitt.
Yeah.
you got a brand opponent coming in.
Yeah.
It's not a huge game going against, Duke or Wake Forest.
Right.
Clemson's Clemson. I don't care what their record is. They're still one of the
Oh,
five
they
best
could win by
programs.
2 touchdowns and no one will be shocked.
Yeah, they're
Right.
still one of the five best programs, college
In the-
football programs, going right
Sure.
now. Regardless of what their record is, they're just having an off year. If
Right.
Pitt fans can't show up and make Heinz Field nearly filled, then there's a long-term issue.
Right. I think they will show up. I will say that. But yes, it is a call to Pitt fans. They have to show up. You don't need to worry about whether it's an on-campus stadium or it's at Heinz Field. Leave that debate for another week. This is a week that you got to find a way to get there. It's not incredibly expensive to go to Pitt games in comparison to others. And I know it's not on campus. It doesn't give you the feel of Ohio State, Penn State, West Virginia, but it's a big game. There hasn't been a big game like this, and everything's on the line. The season's in front of them. They're the better team, and I think I would be interesting to see, Mike, what Vegas does. Pitt is at home. They're playing very well. They have a Heisman candidate at quarterback. Clemson is not playing well. They almost lost again this week. They're crawling through games, even though they are 3-2 on the year. It is not out of the realm of possibility Pitt could be favored in that game. It would be insane because of what Clemson is. Maybe not, but they're at home. That is an interesting spread for Vegas.
I agree. I should won't be out till later tonight, but I would guess. I'm gonna guess right now that Pitt's a
3.5 at least.
I'm gonna guess Pitt's a 2 to 3 point favorite in this game.
Okay, 2.5, 3. Yeah, it wouldn't be shocking. I would say if Pitt's not favored, that's kind of insulting based on how things have been going. Pitt should be favored at home. If this game was in Clemson, that might be a little different. But Pitt should be favored, and I could see a 2.5 just because you're going to still probably have people figuring Clemson would win this based on talent, even though it is at Pitt and they're playing so well. But that'll also be interesting where the money goes. We're not doing a betting show here, but I'd be interested where the money goes, because if Pitt is favored by 2.5, are you going to have people that are going to then bet Clemson, just figuring Clemson's going to get the win because Pitt is going to Pitt, like you said earlier? That would be the game that Pitt has to crash down.
My guess is Pat Narduzzi's hoping that Pitt's an underdog.
Probably.
Yeah,
probably. They aren't going to be, but probably.
Yeah, he can use the non-respect card. Motivational.
If they're not ranked, if they're not favored,
yes.
He probably wants that. He doesn't want a ranking,
totally
probably, for sure.
Totally.
Well, what I do want to get to now, because obviously Pitt did what they had to do in this game, and then some of the defense showed up. Virginia Tech never got going, and Kenny Pickett did enough, didn't make the mistakes, even if the numbers weren't as gaudy. Receiver-wise, with Addison, they still were able to produce some plays. Obviously, on the ground, they were able to get going. Vincent Davis had some yards, even though only 2.7. Kenny Pickett scrambled for some. But, of course, they finally found a number one running back with 140, an average of 6.7. That is a big, big deal for Pitt. It makes it easier on Pickett when he doesn't have to throw 400 yards and have a 70% completion percentage and a 120 rating every single game. He can be a regular quarterback because there's a lot on the ground as well to help them hold on to games and leads like this as well. But going to that Clemson game, we're talking about how big it's going to be. Maybe game day will be there. It's at home for Pitt. It's the biggest home game in a long time. The fans got to show up. We got chatters excited. I'd imagine the fans are going to be there hook or crook. What does Pitt have to do to beat Clemson? What are the keys to that game? This is still a talented Clemson team, even if they are not appearing to be a playoff team this year, which is different than at least the last 5 years, if not more.
I think you're going to have, I think you could see a similar game to today. Clemson's defense is a top 25 defense. I think Clemson is, they're down two guys on their defensive line, but they're a top 15, top 20 defense. They're very good. I think they're similar to Virginia Tech, but they're also, I think, similar to Virginia Tech in the sense that their offense can struggle. They don't have their number one running back from the beginning of the season is out for the season. Yeah. They have a quarterback that is struggling big time. He was a former 5-star recruit. He got in a couple games last year when Lawrence had, I believe he had COVID.
He missed some games.
He played against Notre Dame. He's struggling big time this year. He's been awful, actually. So I don't think Clemson's going to score a lot of points unless Pitt. I just don't see Clemson scoring a lot of points. I'm not gonna make a prediction on the game yet, but I think you could see a point total similar to what we saw today. And Pitt has to play good defense again. I think if they play defense like they did today, if they play defense like they did today, Clemson's not going to win the game. So,
Mike, I'll tell you right now, Clemson's not going to score a lot of points. I'll guarantee it. Look at what they've done this year. They have 49 points against South Carolina State, but of course, that's South Carolina State. Besides that, they lost 10-3 to Georgia, obviously a low-scoring game. The defense kept them in it, but they didn't do enough offensively. They beat Georgia Tech 14-8. They lost to North Carolina State 27-21. Boston College 19-13. And then Friday night against Syracuse, they should have lost that game. Insane they won that. But 17-14. They have not scored more than 20 points in any of the last couple games. They only had 21 or more one time outside of South Carolina State, of course, which is not at the same level. This team is 4-2. This team is still a ranked team, of course. This team is still a team with some chances this year, but the offense is flat out been bad. I mean, there's no other way to slice it. And Pitt's offense, I would think even if Clemson's defense plays so tough that they make it really hard on Pickett, maybe even harder than this game. Maybe this is even a better defense than Virginia Tech because of just sheer talent.
Yeah, they are a better defense.
Yeah, but even if Pitt's a little worse offensively, Clemson's going to have to really pick it up to hang with Pitt offensively.
Yeah, that's what I said. If Pitt's defense plays like they did today or similar to what they did today, Pitt's going to win the game. Now, if they have busted coverages and they give up big plays, then who knows? But I think if Pitt plays the game, Pitt's going to score some points. This defense from Clemson is good, but they're not Georgia-like. They're not Alabama, the pass-like. They're a good defense. I don't think they're a great defense, which means that Pitt's gonna be able to score some points. If their defense keeps them in it, which I believe they will, Pitt should win this game and should move to 6-1. And they got some more good news just now. North Carolina beats Miami.
Yeah, I saw that.
Which means that Miami now has 2 losses. Yeah. So every team in the Coastal has 2 losses except for Virginia Tech. But now with a head-to-head, that's a 2-game lead. So Pitt's sitting pretty good with 6 games left.
Yeah, I would say so. Just at the very least. And by the way, in my correction, Clemson is not a ranked team. Obviously, they're 4-2, but they've been struggling this year, barely getting these victories. Imagine if they would have lost to Syracuse heading into this game, and maybe this makes them hungrier. Maybe a win like this could propel them back in there. But this is a different Clemson team than in recent years, even though the talent is still there. And of course, they're going to recruit and build it back up again. But yeah, Miami having lost to Virginia loses this game. Pitt has everything in front of them, and of course, especially if they would run the table and they would get in that New Year's 6 and they'd win the conference, there's going to be someone out there that's going to say, but why didn't you just do it to Western Michigan? Because that game, but everyone's had an upset this year. There's nobody who's been perfect. That includes Alabama. So you got to give everyone a mulligan this year in some ways. And when you think about it, a national title probably wasn't going to happen anyway. So if you're getting a New Year's 6 out of winning the conference, even if the ACC is maybe more down than it even has been because you don't have the behemoth of Clemson this year being an elite team, still a big deal for Pitt, big deal for Pat Narduzzi. People wanted him fired 2-3 weeks ago, and now he could have his best season as Pitt head coach, certainly not going anywhere. Mark Whipple also as well, putting a lot on his resume this year, potentially coaching up a Heisman candidate and having Pitt right now in the driver's seat for a special year. What I do want to ask you, though, is it really just about Pitt got to play their game if they don't make mistakes? What would happen if Pitt, as we get close to wrapping things up here, if Pitt would lose to Clemson? Could it be that Clemson wakes up, or would it have to be that Pitt kind of ruins themselves and loses it for themselves in that game?
I don't know. I think Pitt had, and I think this is going to be a message from the Pitt coaches to the players this week over there, is that I think people have been, especially Clemson fans, they've been spoiled with how special that program's been over the last, 5-6 years.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that they are what they are right now, they are like they are right now because they have a freshman quarterback that is struggling, and they're down 2 running backs. They just don't have the playmakers that they graduated a ton of guys to the NFL. And most times programs like Clemson are able to just rebound and reload. They weren't, Dabo Swinney wasn't able to do that this year. They have, if you would examine Clemson's depth chart, I guarantee you they have more 4- and 5-star guys than Pitt. So they have potential there. And I think that's
everyone they played so far.
Yes, exactly. That's going to be Narduzzi's message to them is do not look at the record. Do not look at what people saying Clemson is down. Clemson still has talent on that team, despite the fact that they're not maybe performing like that. So I don't think it's a matter. They could have a breakout game against Pitt and everything could come together. This guy could play like a 5-star quarterback. The lights maybe come on for him. Who knows? It's not as though he's some walk-on that's gone out there. He's a guy that just hasn't played well to this point. And Pitt has to guard against that. They can't go in thinking, okay, we're better than Clemson. They have to come out hungry like they were against Virginia Tech. And if they do, I like their chances.
Yeah, and you look at the schedule. Pitt figuring they're favored against Clemson, as they certainly should be, maybe even a ranked Pitt team against a non-ranked Clemson team. What a world that would be. The biggest game at Heinz Field for Pitt in a very, very long time. But Pitt should be favored in every game they play the rest of the year. I'd imagine here you're looking at probably being favored against Miami the way they've been playing, certainly against Duke, certainly probably against against North Carolina as well. That's being a home game, and North Carolina has been vulnerable this year despite a solid QB. Virginia and Syracuse, not great team. They should be favored there. So Pitt has it in front of them. Narduzzi's kind of righted the ship. The defense has stepped up. Kenny Pickett has went from solid quarterback to Heisman candidate. And Pitt really looks like they're clicking on all cylinders, favored in a game against Clemson, biggest game Pitt has had at home in a very, very long time. Maybe game day should be there. Everything is in front of the season for Pitt to win a division, to win maybe even the conference and beyond. So, of course, that's the expectations now. And if things like that don't occur, then it will be Pitt blaming themselves because, again, they have it in front of them this year. Mike, that'll do it for this edition of the show. Anything else? Any tease you want to offer for coming on the site, or any other final words here?
No, we have Mitchell down in Virginia Tech. He'll have post game, but tomorrow morning will be big. That's when they'll make all their announcements as far as we'll find out about the rankings by noon. We'll find out about who College Game Day picks for their site. I think it'd be a huge thing for Pitt. It'd be a good thing for the program. I know they're going to have a ton of recruits there. I'm starting to work on that now. Who's going to be there next week? Pitt's going to invite probably be their highest game of the year as far as recruits coming on the sideline and being at there. So it's a team thing. Pitt has to play well, but it's also on the fans too. They say they want a winning program. They want something to cheer for. They want, something. Now they have it. They got a team that's in first place, has a chance to play in the ACC Championship Game. They're playing the premier program in the conference, national TV. Probably
nothing else you could ask for. It's everything you want.
There's nothing missing. There's nothing. They got a Heisman candidate. They got stars on both sides of the ball. Everything's there. They got to show up. And, hopefully everyone does their parts.
Yeah, the fans and the team have to show up here. I do want to get this chat by Jack Hammers. Honestly, does Pitt have a better chance to make the playoffs than the Steelers? What a funny comment there. No, probably not, because there are so many opportunities in the NFL, 7 teams in both conferences. Steelers, who knows, if they get the win against Seattle with Geno Smith at QB, they're kind of back in there as a contender. Whereas if Ben can keep things going, whereas Pitt, again, and this is going to be a conversation, Mike, we'll kind of leave it with this. This will be a thing. If Pitt runs this table, wins the ACC championship, they win it convincingly. They have that one loss. It's a bad loss to a non-ranked Western Michigan team out of the MAC, but we've seen so many teams lose. I'm not predicting it by any means, but if Pitt doesn't at least get consideration, you're going to have a lot of angry Pitt fans, because at that point, you're looking at body of work. The loss would be bad, and maybe the fact that Clemson's not a ranked team and beating them wouldn't be as great. But I don't know what else you could ask Pitt to do, but we'll see what happens. Again, it's all in front of Pitt. I think they would much rather feel like they got screwed out of a playoff and they're in a New Year's Six bowl than do barely make a bowl or be in the Meineke Car Care Bowl where it was a couple years ago at the best, and where people thought this team was even 3 weeks ago after the WMU loss. So Pitt riding high right now, 28-7, a victory over Virginia Tech, biggest game of the year, biggest win of the year for Pitt. They do it on the ground. They do it thanks to the defense. Kenny Pickett does enough, and Pitt goes to a big game against Clemson. They go back home, Heinz Field. Fans got to be there. Will game day be there? That's certainly a possibility.